Hey everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Payoff Pitch. I'm Chris Steele, joined by James Vecchio. Tonight, we're having a special trade deadline edition of the Payoff Pitch because right now it's one of the most exciting times of the year for baseball because there's guys in different uniforms than they used to be in. And the trade that's most pertinent right now, James, is Anthony Rizzo goes to the Yankees. The Cubs actually get a pretty decent prospect in return here. What's your thoughts on what Rizzo's going to be like in a Yankees uniform? Because you can think back to those Padres days, but they were few and far between. So it's hard to imagine Rizzo in anything but a Cubs jersey.
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm going to say that's not the most pertinent trade. Hello, Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. But
it's a pretty good one.
We can start with Anthony Rizzo since we are
Timeliness.
kind of in Cubs territory and say, yes, it is very weird to not see Anthony Rizzo in a Cubs uniform. But also, I think of Padres Rizzo. I think of Red Sox Rizzo. He's not a pure Cub in my brain because I didn't grow up in Cubland, so I get it. Also, as someone who's still reeling over the 2016 World Series, good riddance, get out of there, goodbye. In all honesty, Rizzo is an excellent player who's always been kind of an undervalued fantasy player because so much of his actual real-life skill is tied to his on-base skill, which in most fantasy leagues is not a category. It's average, which he still does well for himself in. It's definitely going to be weird to see him in the Bronx, but he also fits there, just like Joey Gallo. Those are two guys who are Yankees in my mind. You picture them, you see those pinstripes, and you go, yeah, that makes sense. And it works. We'll see how it goes. And honestly, I think Rizzo will probably do well with that short porch on both sides, honestly. So it's probably a win-win because the Cubs really need to actually rebuild, and Rizzo should not be there long-term anymore. So here we go.
I've got a scenario for you here. You got to kind of, as long as we're talking Cubs, you got to think in the mind of trade, extend, allow to hit free agency. So we're taking a turn of phrase on an old favorite. So trade, extend, hit free agency. You got to pick one for each of these three: Bryant, Rizzo, and Baez.
Well, my first answer is let Javi Baez not be on your team. I've been team Javi Baez is pretty dang bad at baseball for a long time, and his flashiness and his solid glove work at times overshadows the fact that he can't get on base to save his life. And sure, he hits for power at shortstop, but that's not that rare in 2021. It's really not that hard to do what Javi Baez does, and paying him any significant amount of money is an absolute terrible idea. And I don't want him on my team. I wouldn't want to sign him to a one-year deal, let alone a long-term deal. So definitely let Javi Baez walk. In terms of re-upping long-term, give me Chris Bryant. As he ages down the defensive curve, yeah, sure, maybe he gets to be Anthony Rizzo in 4 or 5 years. But I'll take that. I don't want to have to pay Anthony Rizzo today in order to not have him do well tomorrow. Certainly when free agency rolls around with the way the owners are being stingy with all of their money, Rizzo probably won't even get paid that much, but I'd rather just pay Chris Bryant. In my fantasy world where I get to manage and have a decent payroll as the manager of the Cleveland Guardians, I'm signing Chris Bryant. They have no payroll locked up. They can actually go out and pay somebody. In theory, they're going to want to pay somebody because they're the Guardians now. They got to turn some tickets. So he's my number one free agent acquisition for basically any team. You can play him in the corners. You can play him in center if you really need to. You can play him at third. You can play him at first. He hits righties. He hits lefties. He's basically a very good bet to not just age and fall off the planet. Whereas Anthony Rizzo pretty soon is going to be a platoon guy who, yeah, he can walk against lefties, but he can't hit for pop. So that's what I would do. I'd pay Chris Bryant, let the other two people walk away. I understand the Cubs are going to go full rebuild like they did when they got Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo and Javi Baez and Albert Almora and every other person they brought in. So it makes sense to let him walk. But if you were to re-sign somebody, I'd re-sign Chris Bryant.
And the thing is that it feels like Rizzo always plays very, very well. And then there's that time in the season where his back just tightens up on him and he just drops off the face of the earth.
Yeah, I mean, he is a guy who needs his rest. He's going to have that DL stint, not so much because oh, he's on the DL, he has to be on the DL, he's going to be out for a while, but because he needs 10 days off, and that's what the DL is there for nowadays. It's no longer actually a place to go where you're injured. It's a place to go to regroup or get phantom DL because we don't want to send you down and lose your option and all this other nonsense. So, yeah, on one hand, you're right. He's not playing 160. He's not playing 150. Probably not even playing 140. You're looking at about 130 out of Rizzo if you want to play him every day. But in modern baseball, that's still a ton of games. This isn't, 2002 where you see half the first baseman play at 150 plus. It's just not modern baseball. So I don't have worries over his back and needing some time off because everyone needs some time off nowadays. That's how load management is. It's what good teams do. They find rest. And I think, Rizzo's not that big of a concern in that department for me.
And it seems like this season, especially, Bryant has kind of found his way back to being the player that everybody thought he could be, just battling through a lot of injuries recently. It seems like he's a whole player again.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look back at last year and go, oh, he did really poor in 140 at-bats when he was hurt and didn't go on the IL for 2 weeks or 3 weeks that he needed because that's how long the whole season was. So, yeah, he's back, but in my mind, he never left. He had a bad month and a half. That can happen, especially if you're playing hurt. And, it's just an honest crying shame. Remember when Chris Bryant had his service time manipulated, and this is the result to see him on the trading block? Not to see him locked up because they needed to save that extra year, and they saved the team a bunch of money, and the Cubs went out and won a World Series last year, or made the playoffs last year, even though more than half the teams made the playoffs. It's just sad to be like, oh, well, this is the end of his life cycle as a Cub, when it doesn't need to be the end of his life cycle. It's chosen to be the end of his life cycle. The Cubs can absolutely pay Chris Bryant. They designed a whole strategy around paying Chris Bryant. And now they're backing out of paying Chris Bryant because they want to choose to lose instead. If you're a Cubs fan, what the fuck? There's nothing more to say other than that, which is you did not pay this man early in order to not pay him late. And your argument is, well, we need to save more money for the future when we're good. That's the whole point of when you were good. And it's just a crying shame. And to pivot over to our Dodgers talk, they're the only team in baseball that cares about winning. The only team. So the Cubs are 1 of 29 and the Dodgers are 1 of 1.
The Ricketts family sucks. It's pretty easy. But on your pivot over to the Dodgers, it's frustrating at a certain point because they're the rich kid who gets everything that they want all the time. And they just continue to do that. Getting Trey Turner and Max Scherzer. Keibert Ruiz could be a really talented catcher, but catcher is a position where you just never know how to gauge it because it could take a guy a while to show up. He could show up instantly and be really good, kind of like Will Smith ended up doing for the Dodgers. He came out of nowhere, surpassed Ruiz, and all of a sudden they've got this really valuable trade piece that's going to get them Trey Turner and Max Scherzer in return.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love Keibert Ruiz. As far as catching prospects goes, he's about as real as you can get, especially from a fantasy perspective. If he's available in your league and you need a catcher because you've lost Darno or you lost whoever you did early on, he's the guy I want to go add right away. He's got some MLB service time. In theory, there's no manipulation clock because of that service time, so he should be up and ready to go, especially if Yan Gomes gets flipped, which seems relatively likely. And I think Ruiz can be a fantasy difference maker right away. And to piggyback on what you said, yeah, of course, the Dodgers are the only team who's trying to win, and they are the spoiled rich kid. But if they're at the same school and every dad has the same amount of money and all of the dads are rich, but only the Dodgers dad wants to give their kid money, all the other dads are just hoarding it in their bank account. Do I feel sorry for the other kids? No, their dads just suck. And that's what the other 29 teams are. All of our dads suck. They don't want to give us anything nice, and they keep saying, wait until the future, and then the future comes, and they go, well, it's kind of tight. Maybe in the future after this future. Yep. That's baseball in America.
We're going to wait for the future after the future to come back to the future, and then we're going to be fine after that.
Yeah, except if we're not, then we're going to have to keep waiting.
The hard part is that at a certain point, it's hard to remember who the Dodgers traded for these guys that ended up being really good, because they do find money. You've got your Max Muncy, you've got Turner over at third. You've got players that where they were cast-offs and they turned them into something great. But at the same time, you've got Mookie Betts, who, while Alex Verdugo is a pretty good player, that's not a one-for-one trade. That's a trade that they're definitely winning.
I mean, it's a one-for-one trade in the sense that every team owner wants to trade an actual good player who makes money for a pretty solid player who doesn't. So the Dodgers, to go back to my main point, are the only team that says, hey, we're interested in winning. We're interested in becoming a gigantic dynasty and being the best of the best and paying a premium to be the best of the best and to get all of the rewards that come with being the best of the best. And every other team says, I already make enough money. I don't feel like reinvesting in my product. I just want to keep cutting costs and making as much money in the short term. And it's just insanely frustrating to watch because, the Dodgers keep pulling prospects. Why? Because they pay these prospects. They draft people and pay them over slot. They sign international free agents and pay them over their expected value. And why? So then they can go ahead and trade them for major league talent. They're doing what all the other 29 teams should do, which is try and acquire talent, understand that cost comes with the sport, try and win anyways, and reap the benefits of putting together a team that wins. When no one else is bidding on you for Mookie Betts, it's really easy to acquire him. When no one else is bidding for Max Scherzer and Trey Turner with multiple solid prospects, you're the only buyer. It's that simple. No one else is going to pay this price because of how good the team-friendly deals are and how many years of cost control, whereas the Dodgers go, we don't care about that. We'll win now and then acquire good players in the future. That's their plan. It's the only plan that makes sense from a large market perspective. They're the only team executing it. You know, if you're a Boston fan, if you're a New York fan, if you're a Giants fan, if you're any team, the Cubs, the White Sox, I'm naming off a lot of markets that are gigantic, have had large payrolls, and are simply like, no, we're not going over the luxury threshold. I don't care if it wins us a championship. We're not doing it. And that's absurd.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
The promise for the Cubs fans was that once we get this TV deal in place, once we get our own TV network and we upgrade Wrigley, we're going to be sustainable exactly like the Dodgers are doing. So at the same time, we're going to have really good on-field talent. We're going to have that prospect farm system in place where we're going to be able to make these moves and do exactly what the Dodgers are doing. But then when it came time to pay the piper, the Ricketts are nowhere to be found.
Yeah. And, again, the Ricketts are terrible owners in the sense that their pockets come first, the team comes second. But every other owner is the exact same way. You look at Cleveland. We had a whole championship window, and we never spent in any single year. We never went for it. We said, oh, no, we have to have sustainability. And now you look at our roster. We have the lowest payroll in baseball. We're a very good team for the lowest payroll in baseball. And what are we doing? Shedding costs. And we're going to keep shedding costs. And then we're going to ramp it up a little bit. And then we're going to go, whoa, we can't spend too much. We're Cleveland. But then no one references back to those 5 years beforehand when you saved a bunch of money. The Cubs are saving a ton of money not re-signing Rizzo, not re-signing Baez, not re-signing anyone who's part of their core. And what are they going to do when the new guys come up and the new Rizzo and the new Bryant are here? They're going to manipulate their service time. They're going to go. They're going to hit arbitration. And then they're not going to pay them because they don't want to pay them. It's the gambit of the game. The owners have a system in place currently, unless a new CBA comes across and ramps up and changes everything dramatically, which I don't see happening, but sure it could. And this is the game. The game is to try and win when your players are young. That's your only chance. If you're a fan of any team that's not the Dodgers, that's what you're asking for. And, the Cubs did it. A Cubs fan got lucky. They had 100+ years of not being lucky, so fine, they can have it. But every other manager, it's just frustrating to see the Dodgers do the model that the thing is built upon, and everyone else is like, nah, I'm not doing that. That costs too much.
So Joey Gallo gets to shave, and they make this trade, and we're talking about the inequality in baseball. The Texas Rangers actually have an actual opportunity to get better in trading Joey Gallo, and all of the guys they seem to get in return are maybe, I guess, gonna be good someday or average if you're lucky. How do they not get some sort of value out of a guy like Joey Gallo?
Well, I mean, I'm harping on the same dead horse I harp on every week, but if no one wants to pay anyone, you can't trade someone who's going to be making money and expect them to be a person of value. Joey Gallo has money. Yankees are one of these teams that refuses to go over the salary cap, or I'm sorry, I mean to go into the luxury tax. My bad. And they're just not going to pay you for it. They're just not going to do it. And you have no other buyers. Who else is buying a guy like Joey Gallo right now? The Dodgers, and they passed and spent their prospect capital elsewhere. It's a buyer's market because so few people actually are trying to win. It's kind of amazing. You have the Dodgers, you have the Padres. I guess you had the Braves, but now they've fallen apart. You could maybe pretend the Mets are, but I kind of don't think they are. I think they're in the start of their trying to win window. That's it in the NL. The Giants aren't trying to win. The Brewers aren't trying to win. They are winning, but they're not actively executing trades and actively building their roster preseason and in season to try and win. You go over to the AL, nobody in the AL East, the Yankees and the Red Sox aren't dying to win here. The White Sox are still in their kind of I'm building up to being good window. They're not actually buying players. And I guess the Astros are. We haven't really seen them make moves outside of relief pitching, but I'll lump them in as another team trying to win. So I just named you 4 teams, one of which the Braves is out of it due to injuries and lots of bad luck. So there's 3 buyers. And when those 3 buyers say no, you have to go to those mid-level buyers like the Yankees and the Red Sox who are coming with tons of caveats, which are we're not going to give you capital if we have to pay. And then if we do have to pay, we're going to give you volume, not actual good players. It's the market of baseball. No longer do good players get traded for good assets. Instead, they just depreciate on your team. You don't want to pay for them. You sell them for pennies on the dollar. They hit free agency. They hold out. They don't get paid. Repeat cycle. It's bad economics, and you see it at the trading deadline. The trading deadline, all these names are being moved, and it feels like a ton of lateral moves. Like, are the Yankees really that much better with Joey Gallo? I don't think so.
Well, one thing we know is a good value is our sponsor, Yard Barbers. Hate spending those long summer days doing yard work? We have just the solution. Yard Barbers LLC. Yard Barbers LLC is a local full-service lawn care company looking to provide the Quad Cities with quality and affordable outdoor services. Don't wait and fall to the back of the line. Contact Yard Barbers right now for a free yard evaluation and estimate. Find Yard Barbers on Facebook at Yard Barbers LLC or send them an email at yardbarbersqc@gmail.com. And James, as you're kind of referring to there, you look at a team that is in a go-for-it mode, and you've got the Padres getting Adam Frazier. And last week, we talked about how Adam Frazier is kind of a, I guess, pretty good player. But it seems like the Padres already have a glut of middle infielders who are more than pretty good. So is Adam Frazier just a guy to stand in the outfield and be good at getting on base at this point?
Short answer, yes. You're going to pivot probably Will Myers over to first, throw Frazier into the outfield, and just be able to shuffle things around when you want to play Eric Hosmer. And they're trying to do a Dodgers in the sense where I don't know what the Dodgers' day-to-day starting lineup is because they shuffle guys around. Oh, there's a lefty on the mound. Let's get some more righties in. Oh, there's a righty on the mound. Let's get some more lefties in. Let's move people around. No one just sits in a spot and plays there every day. And it's a solid strategy. It works. Versatility does play, and it's a modern part of baseball that's actually smart and valuable and not just blowing smoke somewhere. And I think Adam Frazier is a very solid acquisition. that Padres team doesn't need pop. They don't lack home run power. They have that. They want to get guys on base, so they're 2- and 3-run homers, not solo shots. And I think he's a very solid acquisition. They didn't pay much to get him. I don't think Marcano is very good of a player. And frankly, I don't even know Swolinski and Milano. Those are two names that are so far off my radar. I don't even know who they are. Mm-hmm. So you basically paid a guy who you're hoping becomes Adam Frazier for Adam Frazier when you're in a win now scenario. So yeah, I think it's a solid deal. He's going to go sit in left field and try and get on base. That's his job, and he's been pretty good at it this year. Long term, he probably won't be, but you'll take the year that he's having.
How do you think this kind of affects somebody like Trent Grisham, who coming into this year, you looked at him and he was coming off a sensational season the year before, although it's 2020 where everything was weird and it was a small sample size. But he's a young player who looked like he had some pop, looked like he had some on-base percentage going for him. Did we just kind of misunderstand what Trent Grisham could become, or does he need to be one of those players who struggles and then bounces back?
I mean, I feel like he's putting up basically the same numbers this year as he did last year. He's been very solid. He's hitting in the 250 range, getting on base at about a 350 clip, and slugging at about a 450 clip. As a Gold Glove center fielder, that's a very, very, very nice piece. That's, when you're hitting him maybe at the top of the order or at the very bottom of the order, you'll absolutely take that 10 times out of 10 with that defense. So I think this is the Trent Grisham we know. I don't think he's going to elevate his game and have a few just insane Andrew Jones level seasons. I don't think that's him. And that's not a knock on him. That's just, there's not a lot of Andrew Jones level years where you have all decade performance in center mixed with an MVP level performance offensively. You're not going to get that, but you're going to get some very solid years. Could you see a left-handed Matt Kemp out of him? Could you see Andrew McCutchen in there? I think you can. I don't think those are out of the realm of possibility in how he plays. You might get one out of this world MVP style year where just everything comes together and he hits real well. And for the most part, he's a 800 OPS, 750 guy, somewhere around there, as he has his ups and his downs. And that's really good. That's, especially in today's modern pitching environment, that's really good. I don't knock Trent Grisham at all. I think he's the real deal. And I think what we're seeing is the real deal. It just doesn't feel like it is.
I just worry about a guy who has this much talent and looks like he's this good a player who's going to end up probably hitting 7-8 most of the rest of the way of this season.
Yeah, fantasy-wise, it's definitely a knock to be down in the order. It's a fact. You want to be at the top of the order because you score more runs and you drive in more runs. That's how it's built. But when you play on an excellent team, you can also do a lot of damage in the bottom of the order because everyone's on in front of you and they're expecting to get you out. So I kind of look at it with a grain of salt where, yes, I want him higher in the order. I want all of my players higher in the order. But if they play well. And if they play well, they're going to be very good. If Grisham hits like he's been hitting in the 7-hole, he's going to knock in a lot more runs, probably steal a few less bases, probably score a few less runs, but overall provide basically the same fantasy value. So, yeah, I want him higher, but is that a reason to sell or knock him or move him at your fantasy deadline? No, I don't think so.
So with Miami sending Starling Marte over to the A's, this is going to be their starting rotation next year is Sandy Alcantara, who's currently a top 30 pitcher, Pablo Lopez, who's a top 30 pitcher, Trevor Rogers, who's a top 20 pitcher, Sixto Sanchez, who's a top 50 prospect, Jesus Luzardo, who's right around 120, and Edward Cabrera, who's also a top 50 prospect. So is there reason to actually think the Miami Marlins can be good?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if we think all the way back to March when I was singing their praises, saying they're my division winner, I will stand by that next year right now. That pitching staff is freaking glorious. They don't have any money tied up. So, yeah, they let Starling Marte walk, and they offered him pennies to re-sign with them, which he obviously rejected. I get that. Do they need offensive power? Yes, they do. Can you go find offensive power in free agency? You absolutely can. It's hard to find pitching, and you named 6 starters. You didn't even name 5. You named 6. So if Sixto doesn't come back until July because of his shoulder, well, you still have 5 good ones. If they go and bring in one veteran to just eat innings, or they let Cabrera sit, or they let Rogers take some time in between starts, that's fine. It's so easy to just add a 5th guy who's just an innings guy when that's the top half of your rotation. And what do? You just grab a few bullpen arms, again, to just eat some innings as opposed to be good, and then you bring yourself an elite closer. I think a Kimbrel to Miami, that would be a godsend for me this offseason and just vaulting them to the top of my favorite teams. But right now, I look at those arms, and I just see a World Series contender in the future. That's how much I love Miami. They remind me of a young Cleveland Indians team when you had Corey Kluber and you had Danny Salazar and you had all of these arms that could just pitch well. Maybe they're not going to last forever, but when they're good and you mix those with those Trevor Bauers of the world, you mix those with Shane Bieber, you mix those with Aaron Zavala, you mix them with Zach Plesac, and you just have a pitching factory, your offense can be as bad as Cleveland's is and still be a playoff team. Miami spends a little bit of money, which I think they're capable of doing. They're going to be really good. This was their whole model when they bought that franchise, when that ownership came in, was to strip it down to the studs, come in, get these players when they're cheap, let them mature to the end of arbitration, and then let them move or trade or walk or whatever. It's every team's favorite model right now, and I think Miami will actually be able to execute it, and we've got ourselves the next Cubs, the next Astros down in Miami. That's how hot I am.
And I think we're both on the same boat. Pablo Lopez, I don't think gets nearly enough credit for how good he is and how nasty his stuff can be.
Yeah, I mean, the whole rotation down there doesn't get enough credit. I mean, Trevor Rogers has gotten a lot of praise this year, deservedly so. But, Sandy Alcantara is just kind of like, oh, yeah, he's one of those Marlins guys. Pablo Lopez, yeah, he's pretty good, I guess. He's fine. Nah, he's really good. He's 25, and he's putting together his second straight dominant season. Yes, I know last year was short, so people can go, maybe not. But this guy looks like a star. He looks like a guy who the Dodgers will end up trading for. That's how good he is, okay? So when I look at him and I look at Alcantara and I look at Sandy and just everyone there, there's so many. You look at Sixto. He's their projected 4 guy next year.
Yeah.
We all remember how good he was last year. Yes, he's had a shoulder injury. Yes, he's been invisible this year. Didn't even get any MLB innings. Miami probably doesn't even care. They don't want him to get those MLB innings. So when he comes back very fresh, you've got Luzardo as just maybe we'll see how he does 5th starter. That's crazy. Everyone was all in on Luzardo, and rightfully so this year.
Right.
I don't know. I can sing all of their praises. It feels wrong to just single out Pablo because that rotation's so good. I could keep talking. I'm already 10 minutes into this one, and I could just keep going on about these Marlins.
Well, and Sixto has that nickname of, I think it's Little Pedro, and so that's a good nickname to have right there. So, and I was looking around, it looks like Brad Hand's going to be available, so there's your guy to maybe go out and give some money, have him come in and be the guy who shores up that whole Miami rotation.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get 5 to 6 on average from your entire rotation, you can turn some mediocre relievers into really good relievers. If you can get length out of that Luzardo or Cabrera, whoever that 5 is, or a free agent if you really want to go there, and you just have those first 4 guys get you 5 to 6 on average, you have a stud pitching staff, even if Yusmeiro Petit is your setup man. That's how good you have right there. And I look at them and I have big, giant, starry eyes, and I'm like that kid playing triple play baseball going, this is the team I'm going to build around because there's so much potential and you don't have to dump anything to get there. There's just cap space right now in Miami. If they can spend a little bit and it's fine, and in theory, that's their plan. In execution, we'll probably not see them spend anything, but in theory right now, I just see the illusions of grandeur.
Well, and we talked earlier about the Dodgers are just going to come in and steal your stuff, or essentially the Dodgers find guys and they turn them into stars. One guy that I'm looking at, and I just don't really understand what's going on there, is Cody Bellinger. Right now, Cody Bellinger is a worse player than Miles Straw, and I didn't think that was a real possibility at all this year. So I know injuries play a part in it, but is Cody Bellinger maybe not the player we all believed he could be or was?
No, he is. He's having his Chris Bryant 2020 here in 2021. Okay. They don't need Cody Bellinger to be a star. They can just let him sit on the IL. They can just give him at bats to try and get him to come back. They're so good that their MVP level player can just not be good, and it's fine. And we'll just let him try and figure it out, give him some space, and he doesn't have to have any pressure. You've got Mookie Betts. You've got Justin Turner. You've got Max Muncy. You now have Trey Turner. You have Corey Seager. You have Gavin Lux. You have so many options to go, yeah, you know what? We don't need Cody Bellinger to be totally on. And I will be buying all of the post-hype on him next year. I'm sure he's going to be down in the dumps. People are going to say, is he supposed to be back? And he will be back. Again, when you're playing in a redraft league and you drafted Cody Bellinger and you've dealt with the consequences all year, yeah, it sucks. But just like that bad running back who gets hurt, you go, well, he got hurt. It happens. Sucks it happened to me. But next year, he still has value.
One other guy that I really like where he landed is Eduardo Escobar. He's just been lingering around in Arizona, not really having a whole lot to do. It feels like this is one of those trades that is going to be like he gets a new life breathed into him, and he's going to go back to being that player we've kind of seen over, I guess, the last couple of years where he's really broken out, and into this year where it seemed like he was off to a really hot start, and then he just really cooled off because this whole team is stuck in the hamster wheel where they're just going nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to put together a dominant offensive season when you're the best player on a horrendous team and you're not even that good of a player. You're Eduardo Escobar. You can hit for power. You play nice left side of the infield defense. You're good, but you should not be the best player on your team. And that's what he is in Arizona because Arizona's a train wreck. So when you send him over to Chicago and he's the fifth best guy in that lineup, yeah, he's going to do some damage, but you know, I look at him and I see his former twin mate, Eddie Rosario, in him, a guy who hits for power, doesn't really get on base very well, plays adequate enough defense where you don't complain about it, even though I know it's two different positions. But I also see a cliff coming for Eduardo Escobar. I don't think it's happening this year. I'm not saying to sell him. I'm not saying he's going to crash and burn, but he's going to be 33 next year. He just got moved as a rental. It's a nice piece. The White Sox are going to make the playoffs no matter what. We'll see what he does in the playoffs. He could be a Jay Bruce where he just becomes a godsend, and that's what matters. But long-term, he's on the downswing of his career. He's having an excellent year, his first All-Star season. But I'm not thinking about what's to come because I don't like what I see to come.
And one of his teammates now, Willie Adames, he just really saved the day for the Milwaukee Brewers. That offense looked dead in the water. With his arrival from Tampa Bay, he's really looked like the player that people believed he could be when he was on the Rays. Now he's actually that player helping the Brewers out.
Yeah, I mean, he's been an absolute star. He's been like a 900 OPS shortstop. Those are elite players. It's as simple as that. And yeah, it was Feyereisen, a solid reliever. Is Rasmussen a guy who's got great upside? Sure, it's why Tampa Bay went and acquired him. But Willie Adames is for real. And he said he just can't see the ball in Tampa. And frankly, I believe that explanation. It's very dark inside that stadium. It's an ugly hellhole. I can understand it falling into a trap of just not being able to see the ball there. It makes sense. And so, yeah, he's suddenly just this offensive force. He's only 25. People saw him as a failure in the first half of his career when he was putting up an 800 OPS in his age 24 season last year. Everyone was ready to throw him aside for Wander Franco and Vidal Brujan and everything else. But he put up an 800 OPS in his age 24 season. That's a solid shortstop of your future right there. That's not anything to scoff at. And I understand why they moved him, but it's Milwaukee's game. They were running out Alcides Escobar, Orlando Arcia, people who couldn't even crack 700 OPS, and now you got a 900? Yeah, he looks like a god because relative to his peers, he is.
Well, and what do you think of the Guardians nickname? As somebody who is a Cleveland fan, you're probably a little closer to it than the rest of us. I think it took a lot of people by surprise that it was the Guardians and not something like the Spiders, which makes a ton of sense.
I'll say this. It did not catch me by surprise. It makes perfect sense that the Dolans, another historically cheap ownership group, decided to rebrand by just changing the front half of the word.
Yeah.
Is it much better? Absolutely. Getting rid of a racist term and a racist logo is long overdue. And even though I grew up with them and they're beloved in my heart, they're still racist. I don't care that I like them. No one else does, and nor should they. So throw them in the water, and then you pull the Guardians out from nowhere. Yeah, you can have some little Marvel. You can do that cross promo, and you can have all this greatness. But really, they were cheap. If you look at the new logo, which looks like an old PS1 graphic, and you tilt it on its side, as we've seen on Twitter, it's just Chief Wahoo rebranded. They just didn't want to pay to have another logo made for all of their internal mechanisms to make their merch. That's what this is. I don't think that they decided specifically to go this route to save that money, but I think when it was pointed out that they will save money if they go this route, they said, let's do it.
Yeah.
That's the type of franchise we're talking about. So sure, the Guardians name is fine. I don't have any issues with it. I personally wanted the Spiders. I really wanted the Naps because I love Napoleon LaJoy. I think the Naps is a perfect sports name. It's unique. It's got history. It's Cleveland's own. There's no other merch out there for any kind of sports team called the Naps. It would be so fun. But that's the problem. It would be so fun. It could be unique. You could go with it. You could do something. Even if you want the Spiders, a route that other teams exist. There's the Richmond Spiders. There's plenty of other Spiders out there. You can have such a great name. You can make every other team arachnophobiacs, and they can't deal with you. Again, you could have fun with this name. The Guardians, that's a blasé sports team. This sounds like a AA team. It's exactly what's in store for where they want to go with the direction of their brand, which is as pacified and as simplistic as possible. So I get it. Like, I understand that that's what their motive is. It's just their motive sucks, and it shouldn't be that motive. And sports are about having fun, and you should try and have fun and create fun, because fun leads to merchandise sales and leads to people liking your product. But that's not where their mindset is, because that's a long-term idea. Short-term, keep it simple, pacify as many people as you can while making the change, and just be happy with as little change as possible. So I expected this. This makes absolutely all the sense in the world for someone deep in the weeds.
So I feel like I'm disagreeing with you to a degree, because I think minor league baseball's figured it out, because all of minor league baseball's mascots are fun. You've got the biscuits, you've got the flying squirrels, you've got the vibe, you've got everything in minor league baseball that is just intended to be hilarious and get people to buy your merchandise and just be like, can you believe they've got that name? Here you've got an opportunity to do that, but instead, you're right, they take the opportunity to be boring and just be another team.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at what major league sports owners look at, and this goes across all sports, is they're looking to extend their brand, to build their brand globally. You know, they're local to Cleveland. Well, that's not enough for them. They could become this powerhouse that dominates America, like the Dallas Cowboys or like the New York Yankees. Every sports owner has those dreams. And none of them go, you know what we can do to actually execute those? Is instead of trying to make as many people out there as unhappy as possible, try and make them happy. So lots of sports fans who are not Cleveland natives, when they hear the name Guardians, they go, okay, it's fine. They don't have any issues with it. And that's good. That's what their marketing brains say. We didn't offend them. They like our logo. They don't have any issues with it. Whereas in reality, you want to create a logo that lots of people are diehard for, and then lots of people don't like. And then eventually, when you're good and everyone wears your cool new merch because there's all these diehards who like it, the other people want to be associated with that coolness of that brand, and suddenly you've built something. But the problem is I just executed a phase 1 to phase 2 plan, and they don't want to do that. They want to just sit there and be as benign as possible, because any sort of negative returns is just not what they want to see. They need to see sustained growth forever. 2020, every owner said this is the worst season in history. You don't even want to see our books. They're so bad, we can't show them to you. And the reason is yeah, they did not make as much money as they previously had, and it's unfathomable. Their brains are set for infinite growth, and when that infinite growth gets any sort of obstacle, such as a long-term model which has short-term downturn and long-term gains, they don't want to see it. They just want to see never-ending growth going forward, and that's why you get the Guardians. It's not horrible, but it's boring, basic, and useless. It's forgettable. It's nothing. Yes, there will be young fans who latch onto it who in 10 years are going to be diehard Guardians fans. Why? Because they're 10. Anyone older who you could bring into your market won't come in because it's boring, blasé, and terrible. And that's the strategy.
One thing that does make financial sense is our sponsor for tonight, Monkey Knife Fight. Monkey Knife Fight is a daily fantasy sports gaming website for the casual sports fan that is simple, fun, and easy to play. Users determine which superstars compete in the day's professional sporting events and will record more or less than the contested line provided. Monkey Knife Fight's daily fantasy prop games play similar to the salary cap-based DFS games, but without the algorithms, lineups, and most importantly, the sharks. There are several contests to choose from, none of which require hours of research required on competing sites. Start with a simple 2-on-2 or go for the highest payouts 100 times and higher by selecting an 8x8 more or less contest. Get started now with a 100% instant match bonus of up to $50 with promo code FFSQC. And one other Cleveland-related thing that I really liked is the White Sox going out and getting Cesar Hernandez, because I feel like he's always a player who kind of floats underneath the radar, but he's always just solid. And I think that's what they really need to kind of fill in right now when second base has been such an eyesore for the White Sox here recently.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great pickup for the White Sox because of exactly what you're saying. They need someone to fill in short term because Nick Madrigal's there long term. They don't want to take on a ton of salary because it doesn't actually make sense for their team versus just being cheap. And Cesar Hernandez is the perfect option. You could bring him in, have him be that bottom of the order or very top of the order bat that's just there providing adequate offense and solid defense. And that's kind of what this team needs. So makes all the sense in the world. It costs one prospect who's a mildly high upside pitching arm, which is a very easy price to pay for a guy like Cesar Hernandez if they think they can actually win now, which they should. So it's a deal that makes sense for both sides. I know lots of Clevelanders around who are like, how could you trade with the White Sox? And I go, do you care if the White Sox win a World Series? Do you care who wins the World Series if they're not your team? I really don't understand whenever fans are like, trade him anywhere except here. Well, that makes sense when you're trading someone who's got a long-term value and they're not a rental like Cesar Hernandez. Also, when they're better than Cesar Hernandez. In terms of doing intra-division trades for mid-level players, I'm all for it. Take the best offer. Yeah, I won't trade Ronald Acuna over to the Mets. Sure, that's a bad idea. But Cesar Hernandez, who cares? Get the best return, and I think we got a very solid one. So I'm happy from a Clevelanders perspective, and it makes sense for the White Sox, and hopefully he does well.
So as we're coming into the final stretch of the show here, James, what's the most high-profile trade you see happening tomorrow, or has everything big already kind of fallen into place with the Dodgers getting Trey Turner and Max Scherzer?
I mean, I don't think anything's going to top Trey Turner and Max Scherzer. That seems like that's the creme de la creme. I don't really see how or why anyone would be able to top that. I guess, to keep this Cleveland train rolling, Jose Ramirez can move, but I don't see it. I don't think his value is going to at all depreciate next year at this time, so I don't see a reason why they should move it, and it better not be for financial purposes because we're already the cheapest team in the league. Elsewhere, I mean, you've seen Rizzo move. You've seen Gallo move. Escobar's moved. Like, I think all of the big pieces have gone. You're going to see Craig Kimbrell probably go. Someone will probably get Javi Baez, and every Cubs fan will be going, how did we get so little in return? But it's because he stinks. Yeah, Bryant might move, but all those are singular guys. I don't think you're going to touch Turner and Scherzer. I think that's the max. And honestly, I can't think of a more recent, bigger deal where you got two names like that who are locked up for as long as they are combined move. It's frankly a shocking deal that I absolutely love that it went down, but it's kind of a once-in-a-decade type trade, in my opinion.
Right. And when it comes to Kimbrel, do you think the reason that he hasn't moved yet is because other teams think that this season isn't really Kimbrel? They think that the guy they've seen over the last couple of years is more of the real Kimbrel than the Kimbrel we've seen this year.
I think that that's the story that other teams are selling the Cubs, and that no one wants to actually play their hand and go acquire a reliever who makes a lot of money, who's 33. It's just not something that makes a ton of sense, especially when you could go and get a Joey Gallo or go and get, one of these larger stars. So it makes sense that he's kind of the last piece to move versus the first piece to move, if he even moves at all. And also with relievers, they can go through waivers. Again, with all these teams desperately trying to avoid the luxury tax, I think it's possible that he can get moved in a waiver deal. So I think that could still happen, even though I know that the MLB is trying to make the deadline the deadline. But yeah, I think it's a game of chess. Everyone's going to say Kimbrel's been horrible the past 2 years, but they don't want to look and actually see how many innings he's thrown, which is 35 over the past 2 years, which is less innings he's thrown this year than the past 2 years. So this year is a bigger sample size than all of the bad. And then you have all of the Hall of Fame level before that. So it's nonsense, but it's gamesmanship, and every GM thinks they're the smartest guy in the room. So we'll see how it plays out. I guess that's just how I feel.
So what should the Mets give up to get Chris Bryant?
Honestly, I don't think this is the time to go and get Chris Bryant. I think you want to go get him, pay him in free agency. Okay. I know that's maybe a hot take, but I wouldn't move Ronnie Mauricio for Jose Berrios. I wouldn't move him for Chris Bryant. I would just hold on to him, sign Chris Bryant, and then move him next year if I have to move him. I as a quasi Mets fan living in a household where we're 50% Mets and I watch a lot of Mets baseball, this isn't the time to go and buy these guys. Your entire pitching staff's hurt. Your entire team has been hurt. You've been playing over your head all season. You're a good team. You're a playoff team, but do you think you can compete with the Dodgers this year? Like, I don't. You're not going to get Max Scherzer and Trey Turner because they don't trade in division, so I get it. But go get your guys next offseason, and then next offseason, when you have your juggernaut, you can kind of come and go and take a swing. I would wait. I wouldn't really make a big move. I think the Mets kind of are what they are. Maybe grab another arm like Rich Hill that just is kind of going to eat some innings to get you to the playoffs. I think that's fine. I think another bullpen arm can't hurt them as well. But really, they're adequate everywhere to the point where I don't see a need for a splash. It's kind of weird to say that, especially as someone who's saying no one has any owners who want to win. But I think that their window's not here right now, and I would wait.
Now's a good time for you to take your victory lap on Pete Alonso, too, because he was just kind of pretty good going into the All-Star break. Since the All-Star break, he's been phenomenal.
I'll take my victory lap there and forget that I also acquired Nick Castellanos, who's been very not playing. I'll take that victory lap because, Pete Alonso is kind of a game changer. On Twitter, someone posed the question, who would you rather have, Judge or Alonso? A classic New York piece of trivia to rile up the fan bases. And my answer is, if you take into account a contract, it's easily Alonso. If you take into account age, it's probably Alonso. If you just look at them heads up, I think I'm still taking Alonso because Judge can't stay on the field. And you look at someone like Pete, he's young enough and he's got enough power to just be a sustained, very good hitter. You want to see a parallel in actual output? I'd say Anthony Rizzo. Anthony Rizzo was just consistently a very good first baseman. He would have a top 5 season every year, right around number 5. And he did that for, 8 or 9 years? I think that's what Pete Alonso can do. He can just consistently be there as one of the better first basemen, but not be the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And that's insanely valuable when you're putting together a nice little team. So I love Pete Alonso. I'll take that victory lap. I think he's extremely good and kind of underrated just because he's not Aaron Judge.
So as somebody who does watch a lot of quasi-Mets games, can you get word to Taijuan Walker not to flip the ball out of play?
That was one of my favorite plays ever. Not because of what Taijuan Walker did, which was very stupid because you should just hold the ball in your glove when you do that, as opposed to throwing it very far away, because that doesn't affect the play at all. But I can understand that. It's a bad play, but it's not an insanely stupid play that doesn't make sense. It makes sense to try and swat at it faster. Fine. What I found hilarious about that play was Luis Rojas definitely doing everything he could to try and get thrown out of the game when it made no sense for him to argue at that point. You should challenge the play, and then when they don't overturn the play, then go off. Yeah. But he wanted to set a spark for that team, and frankly, it worked. So good job. But it was the funniest thing to see a guy who is as mild-mannered as they come just try and get ejected and just do mannerisms that you do to get ejected when you could tell he doesn't know how to do that because that's just not his personality. It's very amusing.
It was funny to see every umpire get together, too, on that play and essentially all stand in a circle and go, I'm pretty sure we got that one right. And, none of them seemed to have a doubt about it whatsoever. And then to have it turn around, and you're right, just continue to be everybody going ballistic about it.
Yeah, and, I'll give the umpires a shout-out right here. We love to harp on him. Everyone knows Angel Hernandez. They talk trash about him because he is awful, and I agree that he's awful. Everyone talks trash about Joe West for being this big showman, and he is a pretty big showman, but he's also a pretty good umpire. I know a lot of people hate him, and a lot of people hate many umpires, but they're all actually really, really good. You occasionally get a bad game behind the plate, and when you do, it sticks out like a sore thumb. But please, go look at some highlights of the electronic strike zone in AAA. It is an absolute disaster. It will be a disaster. Right now, people don't like it because catchers frame the ball, and they're framing the pitches, and, this one was an inch or two outside, and that catcher did a nice glove movement to just bring it over. Okay, and he got the umpire. The umpire was wrong. Well, when you have an electronic machine, you can definitely learn how to throw some sinking pitches that thing thinks is a strike that aren't. It will be a disaster. It's destined to be a disaster. And it's destined to just change the conversation, not actually move it. Right now, we're going to complain about how umpires are just always missing all these calls. Next, we're going to talk about how the electronic strike zone misses all these calls. It's going to be the same result. Just like instant replay, it's supposed to fix all of the errors. What does it do? It just has us inspect further down and go, we still don't know exactly what happened. It's going to come and it's going to be awful. So right now, I just want to say, as a relatively young person, keep the umpires. Don't go to electronic strike zone. Keep the human element in the game, please.
I think the electronic strike zone could work if it wasn't so easy to fool on the strike zone not knowing where the ball essentially goes over the plate, because that's the real problem with it.
Yeah, it's three-dimensional. It's not just a front plane. It's a three-dimensional plane. And you're not going to succeed at having an electronic strike zone when the strike zone changes size for every player. It's not a universal thing like a tennis court where in shot is in and an out shot is out on every single court, every single place, all of the time, every time. Doesn't matter who's playing. When you have Aaron Judge up and then you have Jose Altuve up, these are two insanely different strike zones. You can't just electronically switch these things. It's just, I understand that we have this technology and we really want to make these things happen, but the electronic strike zone is like an Elon Musk idea. It sounds really good, and then when you have to put things together, it suddenly gets thrown on the wayside and forgotten about. You want to have the Hyperloop. Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. Oh, all the stuff we have to do to get it done and have it still have all the failures and issues that modern traffic still has? Why don't we just keep the original thing? Because it doesn't actually succeed, because executing this idea in reality is difficult. And that's what the electronic strike zone is. Maybe 30 years from now, we'll have some really cool technology that, can really read a three-dimensional plane. But right now, we don't. And in 2 years, we won't when they institute this thing. And it's another area where I'm just doing a big, deep sigh going, I don't like this, but I'm not in charge.
Well, Trey Mancini had a 7-pitch at bat where they were all strikes and he walked somehow. So if you were to judge it based on the human element, I guess the human element just needs to be a little bit better too.
Yeah, but the reality is we don't watch baseball for perfection. You know what would be great is if Trey Mancini didn't hit and we had this robot that could always know if a strike was coming, and then it could always hit a homer when it's in the strike zone. And you know what that would be? Extremely boring and unfun. We watch to see humans do things, and humans are fallible and they make mistakes. We watch humans make judgments, and humans are fallible, they make mistakes. It's part of reality. It's part of just seeing sports happen, is seeing mistakes. Sports without mistakes is not the ideal. Sports with mistakes is the actual ideal, because humans are mistakes, and without mistakes, we would never see any fun baseball. It would just be strike, 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 and hitters wouldn't be able to hit because pitchers were perfect without mistakes. You want mistakes. You don't want to eradicate them. You want to keep them in the game. It's a weird concept to think about, but it's actually the truth.
Watching the Olympics and watching the robot in Tokyo make a shot from center court was maybe one of the weirdest experiences of my lifetime.
Yeah, and it's only going to get weirder.
Yeah. All right. Well, the trade deadline, we're ready for weird to happen tomorrow too. So for this week's edition of the Payoff Pitch, we'll get to everything that happens in this bizarro world that is going to transpire tomorrow. But for tonight, I'm Chris Steele, joined by James Vecchio. I hope everybody has a good night, and we'll see you next week.